Stuart Murray, how the hell are you?
Very well, thank you.
Excellent. Hey, I'm glad I finally got you on here. I think I reached out a long time ago. Maybe I didn't, but um,
I think you did, as it sort of drifted around. You mentioned the idea of perhaps doing an
yeah,
interview, but when you contacted the other day, we've done a few interviews recently because we've put out a small mini album. So a few people have been contacting us recently so the time was right, basically.
excellent, excellent. So let's talk about that a little bit. What little mini album have you recently put out?
Right, it's on Detour Records in the UK. It
Mm-hmm.
stems from it was demo recordings we did for Polydor Records in the UK back
Mm-hmm.
in 1980, and at the end of the day, we didn't get the contract, and the tapes were shelved. And you probably know if you've seen anything about what I do. I do lots of research on the band, etc. I have a website, lots and lots of different dates on it of things from a diary that we kept, from photographs, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
People have given me information. Oh, we saw your band at this place at this date, and I've managed to get a really good like key dates information on the website. Anyway, what I didn't have was the dates for the studio's time in 1980 with
Mm-hmm.
Polydor. So I'm a friend with the chap who arranged it, called Dennis Munday. I don't know if you're aware of Dennis Munday. He used to look after the Jam as one of the main bands on Polydor at that time in
Mm-hmm.
England. Um, he'd arranged the recording session, so I sent him a message asking him could he find out what dates were we actually recording down in London.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did he give me the dates, he found out that they were in an archive. The original tapes were still existed and they were in an archive somewhere in London. So I asked Dizzy Holmes, who owns Detour Records. He specialises in finding bands that have been forgotten about, etc. If he could get involved and see if he could find them within about a month, he'd discovered where the tapes were and managed to obtain them.
That's
So the
excellent.
last 12 months, it's been he got somebody involved that could work with, because it was the 2-inch master tapes. We're talking about old-fashioned
Right.
analog reel-to-reel tapes. He had an expert again who could work with that. One of the songs on it hadn't even been mixed at all. When we came to listen to this tape, we don't even remember writing this particular song. It's called Sophisticated Lady.
Mm-hmm.
So we to-ing and fro-ing, we managed to get that mixed to a standard that we liked, and the rest just needed balancing basically.
Mm-hmm.
And Detour Records put it out on a 12-inch vinyl the end of April this year,
Excellent.
and it's selling quite well.
And it's only available in the UK, or is it available worldwide?
No, it's available across the world through different distributors. I know the names of the ones that were in Japan, and as far as I'm aware, they've sold them out. There is a distributor in the United States, but I'm not sure of the name off the top of my head, who's
Okay.
distributing them. But they can be purchased from Detour via the internet, etc. I suppose if you contacted Detour, they could tell you who the American distributors were that he deals with.
Excellent. Okay.
But
I'll make sure to
yeah,
link to that down below so that people can actually find it and buy it.
yeah.
Um, so that's
You'll
excellent,
be
man.
find a link on my Facebook page somewhere anyway, so
Right.
you could get a link off that if you
Okay.
have a look on it.
Perfect, man. Perfect.
Okay,
Let's talk a little bit about the history of the fast cars. So you
right.
had your original run was pretty short, right? It was like 78 to 80, right?
That's correct. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And at that time, you only put out the one single, correct? The kids just want to
Yes,
dance.
but we had two tracks that were on a compilation album called A Manchester Collection. So some of our very first recordings that we did, most of the recordings we did back in those days were we'd paid for them ourselves, demos. We were only young lads, ranging from like 18, 19, 20. We all had jobs, luckily, which wasn't the case in the UK in those days. So we used to pay for our own demos in small studios. And one was a studio in Rochdale, which is near Manchester, named Cargo. And we did 4 songs there, and 2 were put on the Manchester Collection, which was an LP that was to promote the Manchester Musicians Collective. And that's quite a collectible now. So that was our first, that was released in 1979, I think, shortly before. That was about the April, May, as the Kids Just Want to Dance, or later in the year, about October.
That's excellent.
They were from demo tapes. We never had top quality studio recordings at that time. What we've just put out now was done in a top London studio on a 24-track studio, which we didn't have in the north of England. The maximum you could get up here at the time that we were using were like 8-track or 16-track. So it really does sound good. It seems it was recorded over 40 years ago. We've been really impressed with the sound of this. We're calling it new music, but at the end of the day, it is 40 years old.
Yeah, isn't that a mind fuck? Like 40 years, man. It's crazy the way that works.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you look back from 78 and look back 40 years, and it's before the war. It's just mind blowing. And music from the 30s, 40s, or whatever, it's not relevant when we were in 1978, 79, and we're now 40 years in advance, and our music seems to be still relevant.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating in itself.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. Like my kiddo, I've recently turned on. He just turned 20, and he listens to the stuff that I feed him from like the late 70s, and he loves it. He's like, oh my God, this is great. And I think what it comes down to is there's a rawness and an energy that just doesn't exist in modern pop music.
That's what I was going to say, because we were all excited. The previous people, your big rock bands had got big record deals and lots of money, etc. And this opportunity created by punk, and I would never class Fast Cars as ever being a punk band, but we were in the time in that scene where you could make your own music. You could get small record labels to take you on, as in Streets Ahead, which was part of a record shop in a town outside of Manchester. Before that, you had to have been, I don't know, the big rock bands with their big contracts, etc., that you had to be, I think, very good musicians, etc. Okay, we were striving for that. We wanted to be the best musicians we could be. But punk rock let you play 2 chords on a guitar and make a song and record it, and then go and play it, and people come and listen to you. And that created that raw energy, I think.
Definitely.
It's all about that scene, created that. And it's carried forward. It's lasted. There is still bands that want to play our style of music, and they're doing it in the same way as we did 40 years ago. And I find that really, really good.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would much rather listen to a slightly out of tune. Not that I'm saying that you guys were out of tune, but I'd much rather listen to a slightly out of tune thing than auto tune any day of the week.
Yeah. And again, everything now is so manufactured. It's down to the people, management, the way they're managed. It's all about making money for the managers, I think, really. And they put artists together and for TV programs, etc., etc. Ours was nothing like that at all. It was just having fun,
right?
As young lads, basically, we were having fun, being able to write our own songs, put them out, and people actually coming to listen to you. It was just a wonderful time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the 2 things. One, first of all, let's go back to The Kids Just Want to Dance and the single. I'm actually looking at your website right now, and the quote mistake that is on there, the Gordon Smith issue.
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
hysterical to me because when I was doing my research and I saw that and I was like, wait, there were only four members of the band, but yet the back of the single it appears to show five, five,
Yes.
right?
Uh, we argued at the time. Our manager was a university graduate. We didn't go to university or anything, and he thought he was a lot smarter than us. And it was hard to say. He thought it. I think he thought it was a bit funny
Mm,
because our sound engineer at the time, a lad called Chris Smith, he worked for Gordon Smith Guitars. Me and Craig Hilton, who was our lead guitarist, both played Gordon Smith Guitars. So it's a local Manchester company.
mm-hmm.
So up against your Gibsons and Fenders, all the big American companies that everybody were playing their instruments. We thought it'd be great to have a mention on the single cover that we
Mm-hmm.
actually play Gordon Smith Guitars. And another band, well, not necessarily the band, but Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks, he was playing a Gordon Smith guitar at that time, and he continued most of his career playing Gordon Smith guitars.
Mm-hmm.
So that was where we had a bit of a link to the Buzzcocks in that, and quite a lot of you say pub rock you mentioned previously. A lot
Right.
of pub rock bands, semi-professional musicians play Gordon Smith guitars because they're built for playing and don't cost anywhere near the money of a Fender or a Gibson, but will hold against one of those when you're actually playing it. So a lot of semi-professional musicians in the UK have been playing Gordon Smith guitars for years. But so that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to promote basically our friend's business on the single cover. But
I love it.
I've read several times that people think Gordon Smith was a member of the band.
Well, so for those who are listening, right? So what we're talking about is on the back of the single. It shows
Yeah,
members of the band and what they do, and then they have a an entry for Gordon Smith, and underneath it says guitars, and then in parentheses, but didn't play them. So it's like it's completely confusing to most
absolutely.
people,
Because we did play them, and Gordon Smith is not a person. It was just, in fact,
right?
Gordon Smith is actually two people. It was Gordon Whittam and John Smith, and their names put together made Gordon Smith. It
I
was
love
that
it.
there is a hyphen in between. If you actually look at Gordon Smith guitar, it's Gordon hyphen Smith because it was the two main men that formed the company that
I love
made the
it.
guitar that we used.
I love it. I love it so much. It's those.
Even the cover itself, we didn't like the cover itself, and now look back and think it's quite iconic because I see people's record collections and you can spot ours straight away with that seatbelt on the cover.
Absolutely,
But
and simple and
um,
black and white, right? I mean, it's just like
exactly, and Tim Llewellyn, who was the manager at the time, said, you know, this is what, because I think his degree was in graphic art or something like that. And something he told me only about 10, 15 years ago when we met up with him, that he'd actually written Tim within the seatbelt. If you look at it very closely, if you've got the
mm,
original record, you can see Tim written in the seatbelt about 4 or 5 times. And I didn't even know he'd done that, but because it was pen and ink.
right.
It was all hand done with pen and ink at the time. Very, very
I love it.
primitive.
I
But
love it.
say none of us thought it was right. I don't know what we would have had. I couldn't tell you what we would have had. Perhaps
Mhm.
pictured of kids dancing or something like that. I don't know. But Tim was insistent that this is the cover that we're going to have. And I
I,
say now looking back, it stands out a mile against other people's covers, but it doesn't. The kids just want to dance is just a title on the back.
right. Right. Yeah. No. I think it's brilliant, and even if it's like the brilliance that you only see after the fact, it's still brilliant, right?
Yeah, yeah. To
So
say, I do think that now, but at that time, when you're like a 20-year-old lad, we were just arguing with him all the time.
right.
Because
Yeah.
Tim was very old; he was 25, and
Oh
we
yeah.
were.
Yeah.
I was the oldest at 20. Steve and Craig were 18, and Tony, who was our drummer at the time, was only 17. So we were a very young band.
So funny. Yeah, and trust me, I know how that goes. I attempted to be a manager once, and it didn't work very well for me. I didn't have the constitution to do it. basically.
He did last with us for over a year, and he got us some fantastic gigs. He was quite well connected in the Manchester scene.
Okay, so that's a perfect going into the next part. But before we get into that, a couple of really quick things. So let's talk just briefly about the formation of the band. Um,
Right.
and the other thing I want to talk about when we talk about the formation is, and I've dealt with a couple of people this way. What was it like being in a band with your brother? Because brothers tend to fight, right? They tend to. So first of all, let's talk about the history, and then I want to talk a little bit about like the sibling thing and how that kind of played out.
Yeah, yeah. It started. I was Stephen and a school friend who could play guitar reasonably well at the age of 14. A lad called Nick Bold. They decided they would put a band together, and they had another. Our Stephen was going to be the original bass player,
Hmm.
but he really wanted to be Mick Jagger. So I said, "Tell you what, I'll buy a bass because I'd started working by then. I'll buy a bass. No idea how to play it or anything." So that's what I did. He could then be his Mick Jagger. Nick was going to play guitar, and there was another lad from school who played drums, not very well. A typical school band.
Hmm.
We used to play in front of the assemblies and things like that originally, and then the drummer was the original drummer was not particularly good, not keeping time or anything. He wasn't that interested. So
Hmm.
we played at a school, another school in the Swinton area. And Tony Dyson came along and said, I can play drums a lot better than that. And he was only like 13, 14 at the time.
Wow.
So we thought, oh, have a listen to him, see what. Say we were only 14 and to 16 ourselves anyway, but he was a year younger than our youngest. So we went along and saw him, and he was excellent, really good. So we asked him, did he want to play with us? And he said yes. So he played with Fast Cars most of the time over most of the years.
That's excellent.
Perhaps talk a bit more about that later on. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's the initial start. And then you're saying about pub rock. Well, we were playing in pubs in the UK. And we were playing what was typical at that time, um, Chuck Berry
Hmm.
covers, like Johnny B. Good, simple song to get you started. We were playing Johnny B. Good, Substitute by The Who, Jumping Jack Flash, Rolling Stones, other songs along that kind of pathway. And we did that for about 18 months. Then
Hmm.
Nick decided he wanted to be playing songs more like Led Zeppelin, etc. Although I like that kind of music, I don't think I was competent to go and play that kind of style of music anyway, which Nick was a very competent guitarist. So he went off and formed his own band that were called Virginia Woolf. And again, if you Google them, they were quite successful in the mid 80s. They had £1 million contract back in the day, which was a big deal at that time. And they
Oh, hell
toured
yeah.
with Jimmy Page at the Firm. So he got to play with his hero, etc.
That's excellent.
Um, Another lad that we knew from school who could play guitar was Craig Hilton.
Hmm.
So as soon as Nick didn't want to play, we went and asked Craig. And again, he has played on most of Fast Cars, most all Fast Cars recorded music. Craig was our guitarist, and unfortunately, we lost him to cancer early this year.
Yeah, I saw that. My condolences. That's got to be a really hard
Yeah,
thing, especially as there's a resurgence happening with your music. To have that happen is like doubly
exactly.
tragic.
Luckily he's been with us. He's played in Japan. We've played in Europe,
Hmm.
etc. And the last gig we actually did was last February, where near where we live here. Pete Shelley was born, the guitarist from the Buzzcocks,
Hmm.
and the town where he lived. I actually work in that town. It's called Lee in
Uh-huh.
Manchester area. A group of people have got together to try and raise money to fund for a statue for Pete Shelley
Hmm.
within the town of Lee. So they've had a few gigs, and the last one being last February. where we played along with some other old Manchester bands. The Distractions, they were playing at the same time as us. The
Mm-hmm.
Drones, another one of the original Manchester punk bands, the Drones, although there's only one original member left in it.
Mm-hmm.
And we played a big hall holding quite a few hundred people last February, and that was Craig's last live performance, and it was a sensational form at the time, even though he'd had cancer then for about 4 years, and he'd been having chemotherapy, but it stopped working, unfortunately, and he just slipped away.
Well,
But
that's a hell of a last
currently,
gig.
the last gig was actually videoed, and I think I've put a few recordings up on YouTube or on my
Mm-hmm.
Facebook pages, so you can see how good he was right up until the end, basically.
Wow.
But
Wow.
we've still got irons in the fire. We still want his son. We talked about Tony Dyson, and I know it might be rambling a bit now,
That's
but
fine.
Tony Dyson eventually his back was playing him up, and he couldn't play anymore. Craig's son Tony had actually shown, I think it shown him the rudiments of drumming, and it sold him one of his old drum kits. So young Rick was up and coming drummer. So we got him to, I think he covered Tony originally. And then he did so well. Tony said, I really can't play anymore, because trying to play our music, which is quite fast,
Mm-hmm.
when you're in your late 50s as a drummer, it really wasn't a good match. So Rick took over, and Rick's played with us for all the gigs in the last 5 to 6 years. And when I went to Craig's funeral, Rick came over and said he'd spoken to his dad, and his dad wanted him to continue playing. And if he wants to still play with Fast Cars, then he had his blessing to continue to do so. So that's what's happening. And we've got a few ideas for guitarists. So hopefully we'll be out and about when COVID allows us to,
Right.
rehearsing with a new guitarist, and it won't be the end of Fast Cars just yet.
I love that, man. I love it. I love it. And especially generationally. Like, that's a lot of fun, you know. It's like when, Jason Bonham joined, like it's that instinct
Well,
sort of thing, right?
I've got a link there. Were you saying about Jason Bonham, and he ended up playing with Led Zeppelin? I talked about Nick Bold, who
Hmm.
was our original guitarist, Stephen's best mate, and they formed the very first band back in school. Jason Bonham was the drummer in his band, Virginia Wolf, what I said had that £1 million contract, and
Really?
toured supporting the Firm, which was Paul Rodgers on vocals,
Hmm.
Jimmy Page on guitar, and 8 other musicians. Jason Bonham was playing with Virginia Woolf with Nick.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So
So,
there's a link. There's lots of links. Again, you mentioned about the Fall, and the Fast Cars themselves have got quite a few links within bands and Manchester music scene,
right.
etc.
So perfect segue, because I wanted to talk about Manchester a little bit, because it's sort of the city that never stops, right? So there have been
Yeah,
multiple eras of the Manchester scene, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it's really interesting to me because it's a very unique sound, right? I mean, it's every era obviously is a little bit different, right? So like when fast cars were their most active, it was more of the, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but for lack of a better term, poppy, punky pub rock, right? I mean, there was a lot of that
Yeah,
was happening, but there was
yeah,
also
yeah,
like the factory record stuff, like Joy Division and whatnot.
yeah,
So it was a really
yeah.
interesting, but you could tell, at least I can, and maybe I'm just insane, but you can kind of tell that Manchester sound. I mean, even with Joy Division, right? It's there's a lot of almost, forgive me for saying this, but almost atonal sounds that happen. Um,
Right.
even with some of the like the power pop stuff that was happening, like Fast Cars, there's still like I can't really quantify it, but there's a definite sound where I can hear a band and I go, they're probably from Manchester.
Right. Okay. Again, for somebody like yourself living thousands of miles from Manchester, it's probably easier than me being stuck right in the middle of everything. Um, we wanted to sound like Eddie and the Hot Rods, which were from London.
Right.
So, but whether that makes, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
Because the Joy Division were not our scene whatsoever, and we
right.
didn't get on with Joy Division at all.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm going to talk about that a little bit because another piece of information that I came across as I was, doing some last minute research, how they were recording Unknown Pleasures while you were recording at the same time, um,
Yes.
which is very, very interesting, right? Because I can't think of two bands that probably sound different.
Again, it was down to studio time, and I said our manager Tim Llewellyn at the time was quite well connected in the Manchester scene, so he had friends within Factory Records, within Rabid Records, which were I think the original band was Slaughter and the Dogs. So Tim used to book bands for Rabid, and I think he did for he got gigs for Joy Division for definite. Hence, I have a poster. I don't know if you've seen that on your research, where it was us, Joy Division, and Ed Banger playing a gig in 1978,
Wow.
and we didn't get on with Joy Division at all. In fact, the nicest person in them was Ian Curtis. The two lads that came locally to us came across as being very argumentative and arrogant, etc., which is Peter Hook and Bernard Sumner, that we just
Right.
could not get on with them. So how it came about that we were recording at the same time, I think Rabid Records were paying for Joy Division and had hired Strawberry Studios, which was like the biggest studio in Manchester area.
Hmm.
So we were basically pinching time. The studio had been block booked for Joy Division to do their album, but when they finished early evening, we went in at something like 7 o'clock, working through till midnight on a couple of days,
Hmm.
working again for Rabid Records, and it was one of our songs, "Images of You," and I think the other track was "Tameside Girls," that were both quite popular at the time. So we were putting those down as to be a record for Rabid Records. And one of the main people in Rabid Records at that time did all their stuff was Martin Hannett. And Martin Hannett was producing that Unknown Pleasures album. So that's how come both bands sounded totally different, were in the studio at the same time. I've managed to get an old cassette of Images of You that Martin Hannett did, and you can hear his experimental stuff with echoes, etc. But where Joy Division are quite spacious with their music and ours is all like up tempo bang, it didn't really work, so it never ever got released.
So
But Martin was more experimental, which suited what Joy Division were trying to do, and we were trying to be the next pop stars. It didn't work for us at all.
so it's
Hence most
oh.
of the demos we did was produced by my brother and
Mhm.
Craig, the guitarist and singer. They produced all our demos in those days because they knew what sound they wanted. And we just had an engineer who operated the equipment, but all their ideas came forward. We never had anybody to advise us or anything like that. We
Yeah.
just
So
rode by the seat of our pants, basically.
see, but that's where some of the best music in the world comes from. Is like you have no idea what you're doing in the studio. You just like go in and you just play, and
Yeah,
a masterpiece comes out. Right. Of course, you don't know it's a masterpiece at the time.
no,
It's
no. So again, if you go back and you mentioned about our single, and I can't believe how popular it is across the world. Back in the day, we were not happy with the finished product. We did like the song, but it was all a bit rushed at the time to release the single
hmm.
because it needed to be done at that time because everybody were releasing records, etc., etc., and we didn't want to miss the sort of the bandwagon. So it was all a bit rushed.
Hmm.
And for some reason, the UK pressing plants were all busy, so it was sent to France. We always reckon that when it came back and we heard that first time we heard The Kids Just Want to Dance played back, it sounded too fast. We don't remember actually playing it that fast, which pushed our Stevens vocals up a bit higher, etc. So
Hmm.
we were never ever happy with it back in the 70s.
Right. It,
But
it's funny. I just had a guest on
thousands
a
and
couple of
thousands
weeks.
of other people,
Sorry, I
I
didn't
said
mean to talk
thousands
over
of
you
other
there.
people. Sorry, thousands of other people actually think it's good, but we would have preferred it to be slightly slower. Perhaps how we actually play it live, we can't play at those kind of speeds anyway. Um, but we were never happy with the finished product. We weren't happy with the cover. We weren't happy with the recording, and it's been very, very, very successful for us at the end of the day. For
I,
something that we weren't really happy about.
yeah, I mean, I love this stuff
Happy
because
now.
I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago who had a very similar experience where they got the pressing back, and it was like, you know, 20% faster than, how they recorded it. And then from then on out, they've been stuck playing the song at that speed because if they slow it down to how it used to be, people are like, "What is this shit? Like this isn't the song."
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's again, we can't play it as fast as we did when we were 20 anyway. But what we used to do back in the day, and a lot of people did, we used to put a penny on the record player to slow it down,
Absolutely,
and
I
with a
still do
penny
that.
on, it sounded like how we remember recording it, and not the speed. Again, there was nothing sophisticated, was there, in those days to change your speed or except or anything. So the
Right.
penny slowing it down, we thought that's how it should sound. So we were never really happy with it at all. But I say lots of people have been happy with it, which is absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have a little rock that I picked up on the beach that I put on my turnstile, right? Or my turn.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, on the whatever you call it. I can't think right
yeah,
now.
exactly. I just couldn't think of it myself. That's why I said on the record player, the
Yeah,
stylus.
the stylus. There you go. Thank you. Um,
I
yeah.
told you I'm getting old. I can't remember everything.
Oh Jesus, dude. We're all getting old. We're all getting really old, and that's why talking about the stuff from like 40 years ago is I think it's really important because as we do get older, I mean, not to be, dark, but as we get older, we're going to forget more and more of these things. So,
I know that's disturbing. That really does, because I
yeah,
live a lot of memories, as you can guess, and to be losing those, it's going to be really difficult.
yeah, absolutely. Sometimes what I found is simply just talking, and I won't have any recollection of something. And then if I start talking about it, then slowly some of those memories will come back.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's very frustrating. I mean, it's super frustrating. Um, but anyway, before we get too dark on that stuff,
yeah.
so
Still got a few years left,
yeah,
hopefully.
hopefully, knock on. I don't have any wood near me, but whatever. Knock
I've got
on
a little
something.
wooden table.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
A little wooden table.
Um, so as a relatively short-lived band, at least in the original, incarnation,
Yeah.
um, you guys played a fair amount of shows, in like a 2-year existence, right?
Yes, we did. Yeah, yeah. We were playing 2 and 3 times a week sometimes.
That's excellent.
Wherever we could get on, we played. And we managed to get, as you've probably seen on our history, we managed to get some good support acts as well. We supported some of the big bands of the day.
Yeah. So one that actually caught me a little bit by surprise, and there's not a whole lot of info about it, at least not that I could find, is you guys played with XTC, which would have been like
Yeah,
as they were just, I mean, they were basically babies at the time, right?
yeah,
Um, and at first I thought like that's a really weird pairing, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
originally, but then I forgot that in the 19 late 1970s
But,
they were a different
but,
band. They sounded entirely different than they do now, right? Or at least,
yes, yeah, they were quite experimental. Um, but back in those days, they used to mix all sorts. You'd play there's a club they call the Russell Club in Manchester that also goes under the name of the Factory. It was the forerunner to Factory Records. They used to have what they call the Factory Night at the Russell
mhm.
Club, and put all sorts of different people on. So we actually supported Dillinger,
Hmm.
Jamaican reggae artist. So totally mixture all the time. We actually thought we were supporting Rick Derringer, the American rocker, and it turned
That's
out that it was
hysterical.
Dillinger. And again, didn't know who he was at that time, but he's famously mentioned in the what was it? One of the Clash song where they talk about Dillinger.
That's
Um,
awesome.
Hammersmith, White. Oh, again, cut that bit out. I can't remember.
Yeah. So it's funny because there's been a lot of comparisons between Manchester and Seattle. Obviously, the sounds are radically different. But you mentioned something that I found really interesting is you didn't and still can't really hear that Manchester sound because you're in it and have been in it
Yeah,
for
yeah,
your life.
yeah,
I'm very
exactly.
much Yeah, I'm very much the same way with Seattle. Like I don't hear the commonalities between the bands at all. Like just they're radically different as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, yeah,
But if I talk to like for you for example, right, and say like, hey, I'm going to mention like 3 or 4 bands from Seattle, and you'll be like, oh yeah, they're from Seattle. Like it's obvious, um, but it's completely not to me at all.
yeah, yeah.
And in fact, um, not to delve too deep into this, but it kind of gets back to what you were talking about before with the Manchester sound, and like the perception of what that sound is. Um, a lot of the bands that people talk about now from Seattle, I consider to be heavy metal bands,
Right.
right? And they were, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they were at some point, they morphed, but um, they were definitely more metal than anything else. It's certainly not punk, and it wasn't what has become known as grunge. It was just it was metal music, you
Right.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Well, sometimes your music morphs into the scene around you. So
true.
you being a metal band, but you influences etc. And you want to play to people, so you adjust your sound accordingly. And perhaps metal wasn't working, so they adjust the sound and they become grunge. I'm guessing, but
Right.
that's the kind of thing we did really, because originally we wanted to be big rock stars like Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, that kind of thing. And we ended up being nothing like that, because what was driving us, we still wanted to play our own music to people, and we adjusted to make sure that we fitted it into that kind of scene. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way that the music goes, and I think part of it too is getting a little bit older and possibly a little more quote talented, right? And as you do that, of course, you want to stretch out, try different styles of music and experiment a
Yeah.
little bit more and whatnot, and that's going to change your sound,
Yes, yeah.
right?
Again, what we started off talking about, the tapes we did for Polydor Records in, it was September 1980. You can hear, if you listen to that, the change of our sound then. Craig's, he was a rock guitarist,
Hmm.
idol of like Richie Blackmore or something like that, and he could mimic all Richie Blackmore's top solos for Purple, etc., etc. But he was changing as it, realizing you can't stick massive big guitar solos into everything, and changing his style, etc. And on that, there's a lot more melodic chords, melodic playing, which became synonymous really with the next Manchester scene, which was the Manchester scene.
Hmm.
Guitar playing like Stone Roses, Happy
Right.
Mondays, that kind of jangly sound. Johnny Marr, the Smiths,
Right.
his guitar was becoming to sound like that in 80 before the others. They were probably still at school at that time.
Right.
We were a bit older than those.
Right.
So if we were allowed to continue, who knows what we would have changed into. One of the reasons we did split up at the time was London in England really, in those days before the big Manchester explosion, ruled everything. if you weren't part of the London scene, then you were nothing. And the London scene at that time were changing. The new bands were like Culture Club, Spandau Ballet,
Right.
Duran Duran, which
Right.
was what they were calling over here the new wave. We weren't. Excuse me. We didn't sound like any of that. We didn't want to go down the theatrical route. That those bands were very, very theatrical.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we ended up splitting up. If we'd stuck together, we probably could have come through on that Manchester scene that came through in the late 80s, because people that were in the same position as us, like Mick Hucknall, who formed Simply Red in the mid 80s, he was playing in bands similar to us, just playing the same venues as us back at the time, but he stuck at it. And eventually his time came and he ended up being a worldwide star. We just didn't do that.
Right. Well, I mean, I like to believe there's a reason for stuff like that, and maybe it's time for your star to shine now, right? Like, um,
But I think the last 20 years, has been amazing. I have. It came about. I was on a college course for work, and part of I had to get information from the internet. I never used the internet before at that time. We're talking 1999,
mhm,
2000. So I did the work that was necessary that I had to do. And I was sat in the library at the university, a bit bored, and I typed in "the kids just want to dance," thinking I'd get no results.
mhm.
And I actually got 11 results. And one of them turned out to be an album that was put out in Germany in 1994. So even that was a few years before I discovered it.
Mhm.
So Back to Front Four. And from then, that's when I started. Well, that's strange. And I contacted this company in Germany, and they told me that we were really popular in Japan. So I thought,
Mhm.
that's a strange one. How's that happened? And I thought, how can I contact the Japanese people? I can't speak the language, I can't read. So a colleague at work said, why don't you set up a website?
Mhm.
So that's what I did. And from that brought us all back to life again. We got offered what you mentioned before about playing in Tokyo in 2001. That came through from our website, being asked. They found we still existed. Do we want to play in Tokyo? So we went out there. Detour Records contacted us and asked us if we had enough demos. He'd put an album out for us, and we managed to get demos together, and that happened. And then from then on, our music's then out back into the world now, not just around the Greater Manchester area or various places around the UK. We were now worldwide,
Mhm.
and it's been absolutely fascinating. Like talking to somebody like yourself, thousands of miles away from here. This would never have happened without the internet.
True.
And about my band, across the world. It's just, so, I'm still gobsmacked by it all.
It is pretty amazing. But there's also like the capability to find false information. Like, I think it's called Pride of Manchester is the name of the website that had the info about the sirens becoming the fall, right? So it's incorrect, but it's
Yeah.
kind of correct, and so there's
Yeah.
a
Do you want me
a
to
danger in
explain? Do
that.
you want me to explain a bit about how the Sirens became the Fall? Do you want me to? And how
Yeah.
Stephen became part of the Sirens. But I say we were more into rock music, but Stephen had heard the Sex Pistols, and there was a pub in Manchester that were playing the likes of Generation X, the Adverts, Slaughter and the Dogs were our local ones, the Buzzcocks were all playing, and he was going down there every week watching all these different types of bands. And he really wanted to get into that scene. So there was a particular music shop in Manchester city centre that everybody used to hang around on a Saturday afternoon. It's a bit like you see in Wayne's World, they no playing Stairway to Heaven, etc.
Right.
Everybody were there playing their own versions of Stairway to Heaven, etc. So there was an ad. He saw an ad in the window for a singer wanted. So he applied, and it was Mark Riley who
Hmm.
became part of the Fall. it was his band, the Sirens, and there was him, Stephen Hanley, and Craig Scanlon. They were the three main ones. And the Sirens used to rehearse in this rehearsal rooms in Manchester. And the Fall did as well. And Mark got roadieing for the Fall. That's how he started getting in. And then our Stephen decided to leave the Sirens and form with me to put Fast Cars together. The Sirens continued for a bit with a female singer called Julie, and I can't remember a surname or anything, but they continued for a bit. Then they changed the name to Section 9, I think, or something like that. And because of the nature of Mark E. Smith, musicians were leaving the Fall all the time. So once Mark had got in on, I think he originally joined the Fall on bass, having been a roadie, his face was known. It became the bass player, I think, when the original bass player left. So as time passed, Craig Scanlon joined on guitar, Mark changed to guitar, and Steve Hanley went on to bass, and that they'd come out of the Sirens, and then they were that part of the Fall. And Paul Hanley and Craig Scanlon were with the Fall for many years. I think Mark Riley had a big bust up with Mark E. Smith, so he left quite early doors. But he ended up working for the BBC in the UK as a DJ. So he's still quite a famous character over here. He was on Radio 1, and then he's still currently, there's a more alternative show, radio station called BBC Radio 6, and Mark still has a show on that to this day.
Wow.
And he was the guitarist in the original Sirens with our Stephen singing. So yes, that's awesome. It is integrated into the Fall, and that's how it all came about. But it wasn't that the Sirens became the Fall, just various musicians joined the Fall. The Fall were always Mark E. Smith with, I think he's had about 100 musicians if you look at their history.
Probably,
some
yes.
People last a day. He used to just fall out with them and sack them. He was an odd character. I never actually spoke to him, but we saw him around the rehearsal rooms. He was an odd character. He's not the kind of person that I would want to talk to, so we just left him to it.
That's what I've heard. Yeah, there are a few very problematic humans around. And when you mentioned,
and I never really understood their music at all. They sounded more of a racket than anything, but they've got lots of fans, so different people hear different things, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that. So going back to another band from that era, or at least a person from that era. So Bernard Sumner, with oh my God, I can't believe I just forgot the name of the band. New Order. Sorry. So I'd forgotten how badly out of tune that man sings. Like it's so bad. And when I was a teenager, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And the older I get, the more I listen to it. I'm like, he can't hold a note to save his life. Like it's so out of tune.
Again, both Joy Division and New Order were not my cup of tea at all. Ian Curtis was the nicest person to say in Joy Division. Unfortunately, he took his own life.
Right.
But when we were in Strawberry Studios, there was a pool table in the basement, and he would play pool with us, and the other two would have nothing to do with us at all. And their drummer couldn't keep in time to save his life. And a lot of New Order stuff is drum machines, etc. Because I think even on there's two versions of Love Will Tear Us Apart, and the one with the original drumming, he used to just do drum rolls around the kit over and over again. And I think Hannett took that away from him, and he was more working with a click track or something like that, because his timing was atrocious, I thought, anyway.
Yeah, going back and listening to Joy Division again, it sounds like there are 4 people playing 4 different songs.
Yeah, again, as musicians, they weren't very good. And I said early on that we wanted to be the best musicians we could
Hmm.
They were into that. We studied, and like Craig was, it was a natural. He just had to listen to something and he could play it straight away. I was studying scales and major scale, minor scale, etc., etc. So I understood what I was trying to do, even if I
Hmm.
couldn't do it. I had an idea where Peter Hook used to have all the notes written on his guitar.
That's incredible. It doesn't surprise me at
I've
all.
never even, in some respects, you think that's genius that, because I never thought of doing that.
Right.
So it had like little dots all over, so all the A's were marked out, all the B's were marked out, etc., etc. So somebody shouts something at him, you just look at his guitar and press it.
So actually, that makes a lot of sense because every video I've
It
seen,
does. I
especially from that time
never
period,
even thought of that. Never even thought of that. But you know, trying to be the best musician I could, and bloody studying, and their sound is like, people say it was the greatest thing around, but at the time being involved in it all, it just thought they were a bunch of guys who couldn't play properly. That's how it seemed
it's
to us.
sometimes life is not fair, right? Um, I think with them, and last thing on Joy Division, I think the thing with them was they had a sort of fuck you attitude, right? I mean, everything about them was basically just like, nope, we're doing this thing. We're going to be quirky and weird,
Yeah,
and that is our thing. And fuck you if you don't like it. Um,
exactly. And then we didn't go that way at
right,
all. So we more really wanted to be pop stars more than anything.
right.
I don't know what they wanted to do.
No, turn into New Order is what they wanted to do, I think. Um, that was flippant, but I think there is some truth to that, right? I think
You,
that
you listen to the big hits of New Order, and they're real pop songs.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Real
think
pop songs. Nothing like what they were as Joy. The early New Order was very much Joy Division without Ian Curtis,
right.
but the later on it was very produced and very poppy
Yeah,
disco
without a doubt.
music. How it evolved to that, I really don't know. Anyway, it's
Yeah,
nothing to do with me.
that's right. That's right.
I'm fast cars.
All right, so let's get back to fast cars, which is the whole reason we're talking here, and we're pretty close to wrapping up here, but let's talk a little bit about what you're currently doing and what the future holds. Like, what are you guys working on right now?
Right now, due to COVID in the UK, we're doing absolutely nothing as such. And with the loss of our guitarist in January,
Right.
we've not done anything. But we're promoting the new disc that has come out from
Hmm.
Detour Records, and say from our 1980 tape. So I've been doing a lot of promotion of that. But as I mentioned earlier, that we played the Pete Shelley Memorial gig last February. There should have been a follow up in July, but with the COVID restrictions, it had been cancelled. That's
Hmm.
going ahead next February. Up to
Oh,
now, we're the headline band. So
wow.
we've got to get our act together to play that. So, as I say, I don't want to mention names as yet,
Sure.
but there's a few interested parties that want to play guitar for us. So
Great.
that's going to be interesting in itself. Because, as I say, Craig played with us for more or less the 40 years.
Hmm.
He was very influential in the studios of what sounds and etc. etc. So it's going to be very, very hard to replace. But what we're doing now, we're just basically playing our historical songs. So if somebody can listen to Craig's guitar and then go, this is it, and play it,
Hmm.
they don't have to invent it.
Right.
All they have to do is replicate it, which is a lot easier than being the person who invented it in the first place. Somebody replicating it is a lot easier. So hopefully we'll be able to get somebody who can replicate some of Craig's sound to keep us going, because we won't be writing new songs. Nobody will be interested. They all want to hear The Kids Just Want to Dance or Images of You or Please Please, all the songs that we've been playing for the last 40 years. That's what people still want. We love entertaining, so that's exactly what we'll go out and do.
That's actually a very refreshing attitude because a lot of people that I talk to, musicians, are loath to play the songs that the audience actually wants to hear. And I understand it. But
Yeah, yeah. but it's supposed to be the entertainment business. So if they want to be entertained, you should be playing what they want, really, and
Right.
not what you want. Having say we had two albums out. The original one, Coming Ready or Not, was more or less our old set. Some of it were the original tapes, but I said earlier on that Detour Records said, if you've got enough old demos, we'll put an album out for you. In
Mm-hmm.
truth, we didn't. Some of the demos weren't up to speed. Some of the tapes that we'd paid for over the years had got lost.
Mm-hmm.
So we took a chance. He does know this now, and I have mentioned it in interviews previously, that we booked a local studio. We hadn't played together for 10 years. But we
Mm-hmm.
booked a local studio and we went through all the songs that we could remember. Some of them are not quite accurate,
Right.
hindsight, but we put them all down. And when Steve was like, as I say, 18 when he sang these songs, he's now 40 something at this time in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
We play it back and he sounded exactly the same, which was amazing in itself.
That's
That he
great.
still sounded like his 18-year-old self, singing the same songs that we'd always done. So we sent them off to Detour and he loved it. And that we
Mm-hmm.
eventually have admitted. But if you listen to Coming Ready or Not, it's hard to tell which are the 1978, 79 recorded songs and which are the 2001 songs. And I'd never tell people which one is or which. But if you listen to that album, I don't know if you have, you can't tell that some of them are recorded 20 years later.
I that
And
that's awesome.
this new album, say new, the 40-year-old recordings, there was Sophisticated Lady that we'd completely forgotten about. There was a song called Marching Us to War that we've played years and years, but we actually had changed the arrangement over the years. And this one still has the original arrangement on it, which was more like being the jam rather than we cut bits out when we
Mm-hmm.
re-recorded it. But you forget about these things. And there's another one, Way of the World. We re-recorded that for the second album because we could remember the song basically. But we never ever thought we'd get these Polydor tapes. So we're now listening to them. It's like, oh, I don't remember that. I can't remember playing that, etc. But
Right.
it's just fascinating.
It is. It is. I mean, one's own personal history is a fascinating thing. You know, like I love learning things about myself, right? Things that I've
Yeah.
forgotten all about. It's fascinating. Um,
Well, I found things out about the band that I didn't know, that I didn't remember, that other people remembered, and say, like, particularly the early days of the website. This is where I'm saying I got dates from. People say, "Oh, I saw you at this place, that place." I don't remember playing that this or that place. Like say, you learn things about yourself that you didn't even know,
yeah.
and yeah, great, absolutely great.
Okay. So this is a perfect segue. So we're about to wrap up here, Stuart. But I have two questions that I ask everyone, and both are questions that nobody wants to answer, which is why I asked the questions.
Yeah,
Okay. So the first one, and this is a question any music lover hates.
go on.
What is your favorite band?
Again, that's changed. At one time, I would probably say Deep Purple,
Hmm.
from 15, 16, 17-year-old me, thinking Richie Blackmore was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now I don't really have a favourite band. I tend, I've got an iPod, and again, that's now become old school. And it's got about 10,000 songs on it. And I've got all sorts of different things from jazz, blues, rock and roll, rock, classical, whatever comes up, I've put it on there. So I like it. I just like listening to music, lots and lots of different music.
Hmm.
I've not really got involved with any modern stuff. I still like the fast car sound and what we were trying to attain. So if the modern bands still playing that kind of genre, then yes. Green Day, for example,
Hmm.
um, they are quite like them. I know they're not modern anymore, but they were sort of replicating what we were doing 20 years previously.
Right.
So I haven't got a particular favorite band at all anymore.
So it just I want to touch on that very briefly because I still think of Green Day as being a new band, but they're actually 30 years old.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's
So,
only when you start realizing they're not a new band anymore. Well, there is a story, if I can say,
oh, of course.
even about Green Day. Um, I've been searching the internet for the last 20 years since I made my website and finding information. And I came across a cover version of The Kids Just Want to Dance by a young American band called Emily's Army.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I contacted them through the websites or whatever. And they actually told me that Billy Joe Armstrong had actually introduced them to The Kids Just Want to Dance and told them to play it, which was absolutely amazing to think that somebody who has ended up as a big rock star was saying, and in Emily's Army, they're now called Swimmers. The drummer is his son, one of
Huh.
his sons. I think it's two or three sons. The drummer in Emily's Army was Billy Joel's son.
Oh, that's
So Billy
awesome.
Joel, this song, "Kids Want to Dance," "Kids Just Want to Dance" by Fast Cars. Have a listen to this. Have a go at playing it, and they ended up putting it on an album. So
Love it. I love it.
to
It,
think that somebody, say, you look at him, he's on a pedestal compared to us. You think, and he's heard of our band, our little band from Manchester, England.
I love it.
That's amazing me. That amazes me.
You've heard their cover of uh oh my God, it just totally the only one song, Another Girl, Another Planet, right? You've
Yeah,
heard their cover of it?
yeah. Again, we've done a cover of that. What we did when we started playing more regularly, probably about 10, 15 years ago, rather than just say these are all our old songs that we played from the 70s, we started playing a few others. So we always did Teenage Kicks, we always
Mm-hmm.
did Ever Fallen in Love, we
Mm-hmm.
do London Calling, The Clash,
Mm-hmm.
In the City, The Jam, and we actually did Another Girl, Another Planet. The only ones we put those within our set. So we're saying basically these are our songs, but these are the songs that were around us, probably influenced us, etc.
Oh,
And
sure.
this scene we're from.
Yeah,
We're not arrogant enough to say this is our set from the 1970s. Listen to it, kind of thing. We were not like that at all. We introduced people to like the only ones, the Jam, the Clash, etc.
right.
Through our sets.
Yeah, I read somewhere that, and no idea if it's true or not, but I think it probably is close to being true, is that Another Girl, Another Planet is one of, if not the most covered song, um,
But it's
particularly from
got a
that
great
era.
guitar solo. Again, because we were musicians, we wanted to play guitar solos, and a lot of the music of the day didn't really have very good guitar solos there.
No,
So Another Girl, Another Planet with that great guitar playing in it was just
absolutely.
superb.
Okay, I said I only had one more question, but I have two more. So really quickly, um, as you've been talking, I've been thinking of the automatics. Did you ever play with them? Do you know anything about them?
No,
Oh,
no, I
okay.
don't.
So when you were
I know
talking about,
somebody who does know them, but I don't know them.
okay, I really love them, and a lot of people don't know a whole lot about them, but there's a really interesting story about them. And I think it was 1980. Yeah, it was 1980. They were up to be signed to Island, and instead, in fact, everything was all set up. They were ready to go. The contract was ready, not signed, but ready. Um, and then Island got cold feet at the last minute, and they signed U2 instead.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
you think about that, like how different music would have been if instead of signing U2, the automatics were there, because they were in sort of um, the same general genre, I guess, is like what Fast Cars were, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
how interesting and how different music would be now if that
yeah.
had happened, you know?
Absolutely. Again, our Steve, if he was here speaking, he would say that at the time, he didn't think many bands were better than us. And he went to see U2 and he said they were class apart.
Hmm?
But I don't know. Some of the songs are excellent, some of the songs are not. But
Yeah,
he
I mean,
said that, of all the bands, U2 were the best from our sort of era, because the same age as us, and they were playing the same venues because they'd come
Mhm.
over. They were playing in Manchester. They'd come over from Ireland, and they were playing the same kind of clubs that we were playing. You'd see their name on the lists at the
Mhm.
same time we were playing, but they just weren't famous then.
It's
So that
amazing.
they stuck at it. They stuck at it for where the likes of us and many others split up at that time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's still true, but up until at least 4 or 5 years ago, they had, um, I think it was two of the top selling tours of all time, which is amazing,
Right?
for a bunch of lads from Dublin, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
wow, okay, crazy shit. Um, all right, Stuart, I've got one last question for you, and then we're
Right.
you know we're just over an hour here, so this is a question nobody likes to answer at all, which is why I save it to the very end. What is something about you or the band, whatever, you can answer it however you want, that nobody would know?
Oh, I don't know.
Everyone has the same
Yeah,
reaction to that question.
yeah. Again, I've put lots of things about us on my website, so the information's out there if you want to look at it.
No, no, no. I
Um,
want something that possibly you haven't written down, or if you have it, it's kind of random.
um, that I had red hair when I was a young boy, which I haven't now. Darker.
And is that a natural thing, or do you dye your hair? I mean, you don't have to answer that, but I obviously dye
I
my
don't, I
hair.
don't, again, that is something that get asked a lot of times, or my wife gets asked, does your Stuart dye his hair? No, I don't. I'm 63 years of age and the hair is still dark. If you was right next to me, you probably could see there is grey hairs amongst it, but I've been very, very lucky in that respect. I see people 10, 15 years younger than me uh, that are either bald or completely grey,
Hmm.
and my hair colour has lasted.
That's
So
good
I'd say
genes,
I've been
man.
looking at it. Must be, yeah.
Yeah, very good genes. I'm about what 13 years younger than you, and my hair is completely white if I don't dye it. Um, so when I dye it, I go crazy, like bright red, right? I mean, like any color other than normal.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah,
If you've lost your own colour, do that. But I say mine is what it is. Never touched it or anything.
I love it. I love it. Hey, Stuart, let's wrap this up. Stay on just for a minute after we cut off. But
Yeah,
other than that, hey, it was excellent talking to you. And I think there's a lot more we could probably dive into. So I'll probably have you back
yeah,
on at
because
some point.
you did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Perhaps a more structured one way. If you want to send me some questions, we could do a
Yeah,
more structured thing. I don't know. That's up
definitely.
to you.
I don't like structure, man. I like to just do random. Um,
Yeah,
and-
yeah, yeah. But because you probably gathered it already. I can drift off here, there, and everywhere. So
I
what
love it.
you might have been wanting to cover, I might have gone off on a tangent, and we've not covered what you really wanted to.
Nope. I
Suppose when
think
you look at what you've got and put it back, you might think, "Oh, I never asked him this." Never. I, I'm always up for things like this anyway. So you can always get back in touch with me. And
that's
now we know
awesome.
how easy it is to do.
Exactly.
Never thought I could speak to somebody on the other side of the United States from my little living room in Manchester.
It's
So
amazing how that
again,
works. All right, Stuart, stay on
absolutely,
stay
yeah.
on just a minute. Thank
Right,
you so
okay.
much for coming on, and we'll
Thanks.
talk we'll talk again very soon. All right. Cheers, man.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Cheers.